Hey, welcome back, everybody. I felt like I wanted to open up this devlog format a little bit so that I could do more than just talk about the game and maybe talk about my thoughts on like game development in general or really anything. So today I wanted to kind of talk about something that I feel like is a little bit under discussed in the indie game development community, but is certainly quite common, which is burnout due to overworking. So I think when you're younger, especially like if you're in your early 20s or even younger than that, you kind of just have this infinite capacity to work. You've just got so much energy that it just feels like you really can just work all day, every day. And I think because there's sort of a stigma associated with not getting work done fast enough, it's easy to feel guilty about, taking a day off or taking a weekend off or going on a vacation, God forbid. So, like, you might be able to work 14 hours a day every day, but you have to understand that when you do those types of things, especially if you're working on a day where you really didn't feel like you wanted to work, you really felt like you wanted to go out and socialize or something on a Saturday afternoon, and instead you just chose to stay in and work because you felt guilty or something. You can only do that type of thing so much before you have to pay for the cost of that down the line. Like every time you work, you have to recover, right? And sometimes the recovery is just, overnight to the next day, but sometimes it's like you need a couple days off. Sometimes you need a week off, right? You have like a certain amount of energy and you're depleting away from it, but if that maximum store of energy and productivity that you have that you could bring to bear is still a lot, it doesn't really seem like you're doing any damage. So it's important to, I think, manage your productivity level with the understanding that your capacity varies over time, and if you're going to overwork yourself, that's going to be at the expense of future productivity. So, for example, crunching, right? So, how much should you crunch on a project? Well, I generally think the answer should be as little as possible. However, it's clear that sometimes crunching is the right option. But crunching should always be something that you do when you have like a deadline coming up. And so if you crunch before that deadline, you're going to be able to make the game as good as possible for that deadline, and then it's past that deadline, you're going to be able to take a week off if you have to, right? You should never crunch just interminably to get the game done, because you're sacrificing your overall productivity by working too many hours, and so it just ends up being this problem where you never quite get out of that cycle where each hour that you're working, it becomes less productive, but you're still working all these hours, and even though you're sitting there working, ostensibly working at your desk, you're goofing off, right? You're not getting much work done. So yeah, when you're young, it's very easy to have the illusion that you can just work from sunrise to sunset, work 14-hour days, even when you didn't feel like it. But I think after a certain time of doing that, certainly my experience was that after I did that type of work for about 3 years, I kind of just crashed and burned. And I ended up in a situation where what I would call true burnout happened, which is it's not when you don't want to work. True burnout is when you can't work even if you want to. And that's like way worse, and I don't think that gets discussed very much. People more just talk about, just a general feeling of like, I'm bummed out and I don't want to work on the game today or whatever. And that type of thing is a totally different discussion about how you manage that type of feeling. But in terms of avoiding like true burnout, that situation where, I feel like I want to work on something, but I just can't focus, right? I think the main thing to do is to think about managing your general level of productivity. But in the same sense, you can take time away from the game as part of the production process of it, right? Because sometimes you do need to take like a bird's eye view. of the whole project and how are things going, and have you been managing your time in the trenches effectively, right? Because maybe you've been spending a lot of time working on the game, but you don't notice that you haven't been focused on the right things until you take that break time. So I think there's all kinds of benefits to taking breaks in long projects. They're not just selfish benefits, right? Like, fundamentally, you do have to be kind to yourself here, and you do have to give yourself some leeway, and you do have to have an attitude that's more respectful of yourself than just the attitude that if I'm not getting as much work done every single day, then I'm a failure or something. The terrible thing about that is that, like, feeling bad actually gives you less energy because you're expending all this energy thinking about working on the thing and not working on it. So learn how to take breaks. If you do want to work every day, if you feel like you have to work every day, at least take a break in the middle of the day. You know, take half an hour or something in the middle of your work session and just relax for a bit. You know, get up, walk around if you're sitting down. If you're at a standing desk, then go sit down for a bit, because your body and your mind will thank you later. Or more importantly, if you don't do this, your body and your mind will let you know later that you made a mistake. Okay, so I think that actually pretty much makes a decent devlog video for this week, so maybe we'll just cut it off at that, and we'll come back next week and we'll talk about some stuff that I did on the game for the past 2 weeks. Obviously, like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't like it. YouTube only cares about whether you hit those buttons down there. Subscribe if you're not subscribed. That way you can see the next one of these when I put it up, and follow development of the game, which I will get back to next week. But this one I went a little bit long on this discussion. I felt like the discussion was important enough to warrant it, but I try to keep the video lengths below the 10-minute mark because I know everybody's busy, and I know you don't want to take too much time out of your day just to watch me rant about whatever. But it's important, and I will see you next week. Have a good one.